We often hear of love and acceptance. While sometimes it is easy to love, sometimes it's harder to accept. How do we get to the places in our relationships where acceptance flows freely? And what are the things that we should accept? What are the things that we shouldn't? My name is Leanna Allen, and this is Mixed Essence. Join us for this conversation as we discuss acceptance. So I have the pleasure of Sister Chan, Miss Chan's company once again on this episode, here to share from her well of knowledge with all of you. Sister Chan, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, as usual.
So we're talking about acceptance. Usually I would think of, when I think of acceptance outside of the dictionary, you think of toleration. You would hear Guyanese says, let's tolerate you, or toleration. Isn't the same thing? What is acceptance really? And how does that differ from toleration, if at all?
When we use the term acceptance, so we hear the term accept, it connotes that you have received and you have taken something from someone, you receive it, okay? You take it, the person, who they are, the gift, or what it is, your taking of something, your receiving of something, right? We can say something that you like, but you know it could also be something that you don't like, okay? So we'll get to that, okay? But it is the act of receiving something, right? You accept it. You could push it away, you could say, I don't want it. But the mere fact you take it. And you also take it because you believe, okay, that is something that will be helpful for you. Something that you need, something that you want, something that will be beneficial. So you accept it. Right? It's just like when we accept Christ. You see, you call Christ, accept Jesus as your personal Savior. You take him on. You believe, because you believe that he's going to be there for you, he's going to help you, he's going to whatever your belief is. So you accept. It's the taking, okay, and the receiving of something or someone.
Okay, so is that toleration? Is that we're receiving it? But when we're tolerating something, that toleration doesn't sound like full receipt. That just feels like, because when we say receiving, this is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Flaws, strengths, and weaknesses I receive. If I'm tolerating you, is that just one wrong move and you're out, or I can deal with these little faulty things of yours, but only push it past a certain point, and does acceptance give room for that?
Acceptance is not synonymous with agreement.
Acceptance is not synonymous with agreement. Okay, can you unpack that a little?
I can accept your point of view. Okay, you share the point of view. I accept this is the way you think, but that doesn't necessarily mean I agree with you.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I can accept a gift that you give me, but that does not necessarily mean that a gift you give me is something that's ideal for me. I say, wow. Okay? So you might accept a person for a relationship. You accept the person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is your real ideal. Okay? So acceptance is not aligned to agreement.
Okay. So then, why do we struggle so much? Because, okay, usually in the premarital phase, we spoke a little about that in a previous episode, where you would have this person and they're showing you little signs of things that you may not necessarily like, but sometimes you don't see it. But even in those situations, sometimes we lie to ourselves. We're the person, for example, if the man loves sports, and sometimes you may say, oh, I love sports too, especially cricket. I watch cricket. But you know to yourself, you used to sit down there unhappy when your father or whoever looking at cricket because you want to watch something else, but you embellish on the truth. And then you get into the marriage. Of course, this is just an example, but you get into the marriage now. And he loves sports, so he wants to do the same thing. And then it becomes a problem where you struggle to accept that this is the situation, but you embellished on your preferences during the courtship. You weren't totally clear or honest with yourself or with that person. And now this is a dynamic that you have to deal with in your relationship. Why is it so difficult to accept things in the person that we're with that we may not necessarily like?
So that's why I'm hearing you using the term, okay, I'm tolerating it. Okay? Well, if before you get married, there are things that you see and you're prepared to tolerate it at that point in time, all right? It's easy, just prepared, right, to tolerate it forever. And that toleration is going to explode to a degree because anything, marriage in the naked sense of the word marriage, if you see something that's wrong, marriage does not make it better, it makes it worse. Okay? Right?
Yes.
It makes it worse. Yeah. So you tolerate it, or you say accept it. You don't accept it. Tolerating something is not accepting it. And also agreeing with something, accepting something doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with it. But you show respect to the person. Well, if this is your position, I appreciate, I accept that that's the way you think, but I think differently. Okay? And that's healthy conversation. Okay? Nothing wrong. You don't have to agree with but acceptance doesn't mean you're going to go and do what they say. I accept, I hear you, and I accept that's your position. Okay? What you do with that acceptance is something else. Would you go follow and do it, or would you allow that person to proceed in that way of accepting that and leave it alone? But you're conscious of the fact that this is not something that, is aligned with your way of thinking. All right? Yeah. And you don't have to change in that. Sometimes you do. I didn't, but it happens to me sometimes, a lot of times. You know what? I didn't think about it that way. I didn't see it that way. Right. So you're going out to accept. It's a different point of view, way of looking at it. And so you accept it, even though it was not your preference or your way of thinking. So that's fine. All of that comes into the relationship of human dynamics. Okay? So, so you accept. The things you accept in courtship, right? Because what you're actually doing in courtship with these things that are red flags, I always say, or inverted commas, okay? Those things that you're literally teaching people how to treat you. That's the school.
Okay. So if in courtship I see something that I don't necessarily like, or I hear you say something that I don't necessarily like, but I say nothing, or I just, it's okay, man, just pass it off. I am literally teaching that person that this is how you can.
Definitely. I was walking on the seawall one afternoon and I saw a young girl sitting on the seawall and the guy was down there. I don't know what he said, but she out her hand and gave him one slap. Wow! It wasn't an ordinary thing, And he went back and was saying, okay, and I saw him smiling. And, oh, yes, man. Sorry. I saw him smiling and having him. And I said, wow, look what he just taught her, that it's okay for her to do that to him. he literally taught her that that's okay. So in terms of you tolerating and giving a blind eye to these things, you're literally teaching them it's okay, and that's how to treat you if you do not address it instantly.
Can we get, not straying off topic, but you said something that I know a lot of people struggle to accept. When you get married, it doesn't necessarily get better. It tends to get worse. And for a lot of us, we're taught somehow, either through media or our own consciousness, that my love will be strong enough to change this person. Or, when we get married, this thing is not going to be so bad, man. We can do what we need to do. I can do whatever I need to do to make sure it doesn't get to that place. But that, in actuality, isn't what usually happens when we get married. Why do we say that when you get married, in many instances, things do not get better, they get worse?
A number of reasons. When something that struck me when I was doing my family life education program, the professor said something that stuck with me. He said that the natural course, we're not talking about spiritual alignment and helping God. He said the natural course for any relationship is for it to drift apart. The natural course for any relationship is for it to drift apart.
Is that why it takes so much work?
That's right. In other words, he didn't really say, and you know what? He didn't say fall apart. He didn't say something else, move them apart. He said drift. And we're talking about drifting marriages. The things that happen after marriage, and it's a slow process. And you're drifting, and you're not even feeling it, The sea might be pretty calm, but you're drifting anyway. And when you catch yourself, you're so far apart, okay? To bring it back. So what people need to be aware of in their courtship, all right, is that you need to address these matters and the false notion that you have the capacity, right, to either live with it or that you can love the person to a better place, right? I have news for you. You are not baby Jesus, now Holy Ghost Junior.
Got it in my inside pocket.
Okay? Right? Okay? So you see, you need to address it. But marriage is often driven by a lot of things. Everybody getting married. I need a partner. In the church, you don't want to have a child out of wedlock, so you're drifting. Age is catching up with you, okay? So those things tend to cloud your vision, all right? And you may like the person. This is the person I want. He has everything. He looks chicks and bosses, right? He can sing very well, or he's so kind, or he is so quiet, I like him. Oh, he's very quiet, And so much of the things that you're drawn to, okay, that put you in the acceptance mode of the person. And to a large extent, the same thing that attracted you to that person becomes your nightmare after.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Let me tell you this, one thing that attracts, I love flowers. I love flowers. And when I met my husband, he was into flowers, and he was a police officer, so he was dressing the place up nice with these flowers, And I thought, wow, this is so nice. When we got married, what I expect?
More flowers.
flowers, right? Okay? Flowers. So when he said to me, right, that you are fighting yourself behind flowers instead of going and plant some greens.
Oh. Okay then.
I was in shock.
Right.
Because I thought I understood. But what I realized that while he was doing the flowers was to keep his environment very nice, so when inspection came around, he would get high grades for having the best place. It wasn't for the love of flowers. Right? But he grew up with his father planting greens, corral, and these things, and he enjoyed, what he really enjoyed was picking out, yes, and now when you see him, when he's ripping from the yard, he's so happy and bringing it upstairs. That was it, wasn't flowers. So you have to be very mindful of what attracts you to your part, the things that you accept, the things you believe in the honeymoon part of the relationship. Okay? Because the same things that attract you could become your nightmare when the moon goes into eclipse. Because the honey leaves the moon, you know.
True. True.
It takes a whole lot of work to keep the one, keep your relationship will transition, okay? Yeah. And I'm probably sounding like Mission Impossible, okay? It's not, but you know, there's a side where somebody must be saying out there, but God can help you. Where is God in all this? We'll talk where God is in all this. Yeah. I'm talking about the natural course of our natural human sinful tendencies where relationships are concerned. The same guy that was very quiet, that loved, okay, is the same guy you want to talk a lot. And he doesn't talk. You can't get anything out of it. You can't get anything out of it. He sits so quiet. You ask him a question. But you were attracted to that because he was quiet.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that because we spoke to acceptance in the what we do in acceptance in relation to acceptance in the premarital stage, but there are many persons in their marriage, especially women, I find, I don't understand, but I think we tend to more try to have a difficulty accepting our spouses as they are. He doesn't do enough around the house, he doesn't talk enough, he talks too much, he doesn't give me this, he doesn't do that. We tend to struggle sometimes to just accept that this is the man, this is the person that I have chosen. I'm laughing because I was having a similar conversation with a friend a while ago and she was like, why this man, this, and I was telling her, you didn't marry you. You didn't marry yourself. If you married you, you would have been busy doing this, making this happen, but you didn't marry you. And in many instances, we are attracted to people that are not like us in many different ways. But we struggle to get to the point of accepting this person as they are. What can we do or say to the wife or the husband that is struggling to say, this is the person, I have to just let it go and let them be? How can you what do you do to get to a place of great acceptance in your relationship?
Well, where does it come from that we expect the person to be us, okay, right? You know, when you get married, you put your hands together, right, you know? And the two shall be what?
One. But that doesn't mean the same, does it?
Oneness is not sameness. And so, by the time they finish and the two shall be one, and after the wedding, they go home, they're trying to figure out which one. She's going to become me or I'm going to become her. Okay? So there's the confusion between oneness and sameness. Now, you will have oneness, one flesh, you have sex, right? There's oneness in terms of your goal. right? You want to live happily ever after. That's fairy tale. Okay, you want to have a nice house. You might need children. You might, you have one is to be together forever. Those are one things that you have in common. A lot of
Your
desires for the
goals, your
family, your
aspirations.
goals, your accept. But the thing about it, what confuses the issue, is that the journey towards that goal, those goals, the journey is very, very different for a man and for a woman. And that's where the challenge comes in. Okay? Because what makes the woman happy towards that happiness to the home, and what makes the man happy towards the happiness of are two different pathways. So how do we relate to each other to have that combined happiness with respect and acceptance of who we are? Because we are different by God's design. Our differences, okay, are not meant to divide us. Okay? Our differences in the main, these differences are made to complement each other. All right? To complement each other towards the happiness. Right? And what sometimes we do is want the other person to jump on our road, okay? And you jump on the other person. That's the only way it happens. And that's a recipe for disaster, okay? So you have to get the concepts clear, right? What we do also is take our differences and become indifferent to each other. Do you know that's among the fundamental basis for domestic violence and abuse?
Indifference.
When we become indifferent to each other, okay, right? We say things and because you're not doing it my way, all kinds of abuse, verbal, and if you can't do it, well, I'm not going to give you any money because you're not buying what I want to buy, whatever. The tension keeps going, going until it ends up in all kinds of abuse, okay? Right? Whether it's financial, emotional, physical, whatever, okay? It stems from the fact that we're not on the same page in understanding that we're different. But to get courage is not a negative and a positive. Minds got to come together. They complement each other, okay? But those are things that we don't learn, okay? Right? We just make the assumption that we are going to be happy ever after in the same way, at the same rhythm, at the same time, when we are fundamentally different, even we think differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember lots of experiences in my relationship where I had those light bulb moments where I see this thing a certain way, and then when my husband shares his perspective, it's like totally, my brain would have never processed the perspective he was coming from. If I was in the mode of fixing my husband mode, then I would discount his opinion,
Exactly.
disqualify him, and say, no, this is the way you're supposed to think about it. But who died and made me God? Who died and made me the standard by which things should be said, or by which things should be done? So I think acceptance, part of accepting is seeing yourself for who you truly are. You're not the one in control. You don't need to be in control, but that may come from trauma. You understand that? But you don't need to be the one that always decides the direction of where we're going. It's not you at the helm and this person is your crewmate, so to speak. You both need to steer the ship of your relationship. And in so doing, you have to give that person space.
But that doesn't necessarily mean, you're right, that the idea coming from either partner, a partner have a better idea. And this is not only a relationship, it's working with men to the work environment,
Okay.
Oh, you have to be very, very conscious because there's this thing that is called ego, right? You got to be very mindful. Men are very sensitive to certain things. They feel bad and, the macho imagery get hurt very easily. And I have a lot of that in the work environment, okay, right? I can share this easy with the guys were doing something and I saw a more progressive way of having done. Well, you think I could get them to go easily? I had to just, and the more they were doing what they were doing, right, it cost more time, right, the more defensive they become, okay? So guess what I did? I realized, well, the ego is here, right? I'm working with that. And I stepped back, okay? But I stayed with them and we continued to talk and they would call me, Miss Channel, could we get through whatever? But there was a section they got to. And they had to do exactly what I was saying, right? So my turn came, right? I said, there you go, exactly. So they work with that rhythm. So sometimes, even though you may have a better way of doing it, or better saying, you have to realize what you're up against, and so have yourself well timed. Because acceptance, to have somebody accept what you say, or an idea that you have, okay, it must be well toned, well placed, and well timed.
Well toned.
Well placed and well timed. If not, as good as your ideas will be, okay, we call them constructive ideas.
Constructive criticism.
Or constructive criticism, okay, right? Or, the constructive listening. And sometimes you hear some people have some good, anyway, I'll come to that just now, okay, right? So, it has to be well placed, and this ties in with constructive criticism, okay? You're not doing really well in this way. It needs to change. We need to do something that's different. But if it's not well positioned, as good as the idea is, as helpful as it is, as real as it is, if it's served very badly, you've lost the constructiveness of it. So constructive criticism is not in the content of what you're saying. It's good. But is in the context of how it is presented.
That's important. Because I think a lot of times it can come across as nagging.
All kinds of things come across too. I remember once, my daughter was small, she was about 13 or so, and, my husband got very excited, well, not upset, but these boys that are calling, okay? And he confronted her one evening. Now, he's in the military. I am social science. Right? So obviously, we can have a different approach to correcting that situation, okay, right? So, we're different here, right? Now, I had to be quiet, zip my mouth, and at that moment, even though I did not agree with it, I accepted that moment in time. I allow it to go as is. Okay? That's a form of accepting at that point in time.
Yeah.
Did I agree? No. Right. So everybody went to bed, and about 2 a.m., we talked about time. We woke up. Time. This is a good bed sometimes, most of the time, okay? So the time. We slept, cool off, now you're fresh. So that's time. This was the bed. The place don't have to be, you choose your place. When I share a story, it's not your story, it's not anybody. Don't go do what I do because I am me. But I want people to get a principle, right? But the principle is a critical thing, okay? And Antonio said, you know what? This is how I said. It must be very difficult for young girls growing up these days. Yeah? Right? It must be so good. And our conversation evolved into him telling me and reminding himself of all the girls he used to go out and get chased and all this long story, and it became fun. You know what he did? He got up at that time in the morning and he went to my daughter and he woke her up and apologized. So is the difference between was a constructive way of dealing with because had I intervened at that time, I said, how you could tell her that after all she's not going? You remember what you used to do? Whatever. No, you ego there. I will interfere with his ego. causing him some amount of disrespect and disregard.
Taught her.
And I would have been teaching her, right? That's not that's not the right way he's handling it. I'm the expert, okay? You don't need that. You don't need to compete, all right? So I like talk, right? When you see I could hold it forward and zip it, right? It's strategic.
Right.
And you don't ever perfect these things, eh? You don't ever perfect these things. There are times when I record, something to talk about. And you know how to correct it, right? So when people talk about constructive criticism, right, but I'm trying to help you. You better make sure it's well timed, well placed, well toned, because what happens is like serving good food on a dirty plate. The food is the information. Nice food, that's all. Right. But when you look at the plate, if you saw somebody eating that plate before you know what, it close your appetite down. Yeah. So you're the plate, okay? So you have to go to the information, but if you don't serve it well, right? You, as I said, you on your foot and go to hell, which is you and your information. So in terms of accepting, right, is not necessarily mean agreeing, but working with it, working through it. We are different, and you have to be prepared. Well, do you have to? No, you don't have to. You need to. Okay? Because the only thing is that people will keep your color and die. Okay? Other than that, anything else is a choice. Because even your color, some people fight with. Okay? Right. Okay? And die. However, you need to be prepared to accept some things that you cannot change. You know the serenity prayer. God help me, right? Okay, to accept the things I cannot change. That's a big one. Courage to change the things I can. And that courage there means that you have to have information and a willingness and a God-fearingness, a connectedness to be able to work to the change, because change is not easy, even in yourself or for the other. So you have to have courage and strength to make the change. And guess what? The wisdom to know the difference, because you could put your energies in the wrong direction. All right? So here's what I can change. I'll work with that. And for that, I always tell people, I don't know how much says, except in the case of abuse. Okay? I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to leave one partner to go to the next. Okay? Because the principles of getting along remains the same. It's the same thing you're starting all over again. Why do you want to have that struggle 3 times in your life? Because the person that you're going to is also different from you. And the person you have to work through the skills that you require to work through this one, okay? You would need the same skills, so it might be a different kind of difference, right? Different, but the skills and what is required to change remains the same from person to person. So except in the case of violence where your life is at risk, okay? You got to get out of that, okay? It's not safe to stay, all right? However, other than that, you need to do that to know what you can change and difference, okay? Accept. So in terms of the things we overlook in courtship, all right? As a matter of fact, Nancy Van Pelt, she wrote a lot of books, but she was one of my professors, okay? Oh, yes, awesome. But she said that when she was a great counselor, but she realized that the problem was not in the marriage. So she reduced counseling, right? And she went to courtship. She did a lot of work, you have seen her book, a lot of work on courtship. Right. Because she realized this is what came forward. But when she started to work in the area of courtship, she found it's not the courtship, it was in the area of parenting. So she kept going back to the foundation where the damage was done, because what you're fixing at the level of the marriage, the damage was done so many times back. And so she started. Another one that this was another professor I had, She was a counselor, and while she was teaching us these great skills, she said she's coming out of counseling. Well, here am I, a student. That's all this.
Right.
You teaching me all these techniques and all these behavior science and whatever, and you leaving it. So I asked her, and her name was Wanda, beautiful girl. She said, more often than not, when people come for help, it's late, very late. And the level of energies you have to take to adjust it, she doesn't have the time for it. And I see it every day, because when somebody's coming for counseling and you check how long this has been going on, I say to myself, I wonder if they know the resilience they will need to make a change here. So the area to address their differences and the things that you accept very early, and think you're going to work it out and figure it out, they only get worse. Except for so where's God in all this?
Sister Chan, thank you so much.
But I just want to say, right, that the fun, God can make a difference.
He can.
He can. Our conversation was the natural flow of things in our human frailty and our human weaknesses. To change that equation, right, you need to be fully deep, connected to and spiritually aligned to God.
And this
Okay,
is not church. This is relationship.
This is your relationship with God, your faith. You believe that He's going to help you through this. You have to have a spirit of discernment, your patience, your tolerance, your kindness, your forgiveness, your fun. All of that comes together is a journey that will keep you together, right? As against the natural course of any relationship for it to drift apart.
One thing that I found very useful for me is to remember that God is still raising my husband.
He's raising all of us.
He's raising, so just like He's raising me, He's still raising him.
Yes!
And while in a specific area, I may be at this level, and he may be at this level in my eyesight, he's still being raised.
Oh, you bet.
Not at my rate, but he's in a process. And I can't cause him to negate his process. This is where he is.
I have a question for you. Why do you think he's not still raising me?
Well, he's still raising all of us.
You know, sometimes I'm saying that I have all this information, all right? And I work hard. And if I don't have this information to kick in, right? Well, I said, heavens help. Yeah, humanist. I said, heavens help people who don't have this information and people who are not aligned to God. They can't make it. It's close to mission impossible because you, with the information you have, the experience you have, you see how it can work, you still come up to times when you have a major struggle. But for me, I tell you, I have an accountable partner. Okay, right? So as much as you're helping others, because you could be actually running on empty, okay? Because you're giving off so much on an ongoing basis, you're not filling yourself. So you have to have somebody, okay? I mean, who could come there, sit with you, and you can have the opportunity to offload. So a comfortable partner, even the work you do, is necessary. But God is still raising all of us.
Yes, yes, He is.
It's a journey.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
So much. For me, all these topics leave you wanting more because again, there is just so much to discuss. But I'm really glad for this initial discussion, and we can always revisit this topic and get more in depth into it. If you have any questions or comments, anything that you'd like to be clarified or any thoughts, feel free to share. Do like and subscribe to our page. I hope this was a blessing to you as it was to me. Take good care. This is Miss